Okay, picking back up with chapter 22. It's Isaiah 53, God's righteous servant, versus Jesus. Who fits the verses? It's not Jesus. This is already part 3. The first two parts were fairly short, around 20 minutes. I kept getting interrupted. I think I can get a full 30 minutes on this one. So picking back up from part 2, and again, this is God's writing. This is what he dictated to me, commanded me and directed me to write, to type. We always call it write. Just as he did the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, the Torah, to Moses. And he had each of the prophets write their own book. They all became men and divine beings. When the Spirit of God alights upon you, he enters you, and God is in the Spirit. And we find that in Ezekiel and actually in the Torah. And of course, I can attest to it because I am the man the Spirit of God lit upon the twig of the shoot of the stump of Jesse in Isaiah chapter 11. And then I could hear God speak because God is in his Spirit. A man in divine beings, also known as a host of the Lord's hosts. And that was covered in the part 2. And God brings the redemption of the Jewish people through him with covenants and a third temple. This is from Ezekiel 37, verses 26 through 28. I will make a covenant of friendship with them. It shall be an everlasting covenant with them. I will establish them and multiply them, and I will place my sanctuary among them forever. See, he knows it's not there. My presence shall rest over them. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And when my sanctuary abides among them forever, the nations, the Gentiles, shall know that the Lord does sanctify Israel. Okay, that's the Messianic era. Okay, that's the day of the Lord. The Messianic era the rabbis teach, and primarily seems to have come from Rambam and world exaltation of the Jews. None of that's in the Hebrew Bible. This is in the Hebrew Bible. This is what's going to happen. And it's here. The covenant of friendship. Both of them are in this book. And they become effective when these books are published, which we're working on. And through the righteous servant, Moshiach, God does not perfect the world. A world of peace, I guess, is what that means. And that must come from Rambam. Well, it does. Perfect the world. He said that. He has his vindication. Nobody seems to get that. Well, it's in the Hebrew Bible. Thus said the Lord, your Lord, your God who champions his people. Herewith I take from your hand the cup of reeling, the bowl, the cup of my wrath. You shall never drink it again. I will put it in the hands of your tormentors, who have commanded you, get down that we may walk all over you, so that you made your back like the ground, like a street for passerby. That's Isaiah 51, verses 22 and 23. The tormentors, that would be the Christians who took their book and told them it was prophetic of Jesus. And said they didn't know how to understand, know how to read it, and attached it to their New Testament, their Gospels and such. They call it an Old Testament. Well, it's pretty vibrant right now. Day of the Lord, you find in Malachi 3. Tormentors, Christianity, Islam, and the world. Jesus spoke a prophecy on more than one occasion. that he would return to his generation 5 times, and the eyes of those that pierced him with the Spirit would see it. Oh, in the book of Revelations, chapter 1, verse 7, the book of Revelations, Jesus says, those who pierced me with the spear, and that would be on the cross to make sure he was dead, would see him return. Well, they're dead. They've been gone a long time. Every one of his prophecies would have been, had to be in his generation. He's not coming back. All 5 prophecies failed. He didn't come back. I don't know why they're waiting on him. And I guess they just don't want to read that. It did not happen. His brazen oath to return quickly. 5 times, the last page of the Revelation. I will return quickly. I will return quickly. And I think that's because he knew he hadn't gotten done the things he was supposed to. He's supposed to defeat Rome, not get crucified by him. And that's the big lie in the seat of Jesus. He changed verse 10 of the prophecy. Changed the prophecy. It did not happen. His brazen oath to return quickly was not vindicated. Jesus called out on the cross to God, "Why have you forsaken me?" Forsaken means to abandon, which is the opposite of vindication and redemption. And just recently, God was telling me what that is he thought he was the man of Isaiah 53. And he's given long life. He's exposed to death, but given long life. And all of a sudden, Jesus finally gets it. He realizes he's about to die. And he feels like God forsaked him. And he didn't think he was going to die. Even when he rode in to Jerusalem, knowing full well there was a chance he could get captured. And he was. Why have you forsaken me? Makes perfect sense to me. Verse 2. Boy, it took me 3 parts to get over verse 1. And this is a long chapter. For about 20 pages. For he has grown by God's favor like a tree crown, like a tree trunk out of arid ground. He had no form or beauty that we should look at him, no charm that we should find him pleasing. That's from the Jewish Publication Society translation, 1985 version. Okay, Midrash. Like a tree trunk out of arid ground. Commentary. Isaiah chapter 11 verse 1, describing the anointed one, Moshiach. A shoot shall grow out of the stump of Jesse. A twig shall sprout from his stalk. Just a twig, not a branch. Isaiah prophetically refers to the stump of Jesse, father of King David. Of course, God had him write this. It's really God's having him write a prophecy as an announcement of the ending of the lines of the kings of Judah, whose last king, Jeconiah, was banished and his line terminated from ever ruling over Judah and Jerusalem again, and that includes his children. The ancestral tree of David forbidden to ever rule again over Judah and Jerusalem. The tree fell, leaving only a stump. That's the stump of chapter 11. It is the line of heirs in the first chapter of the book of Matthew of the New Testament. The line of Jesus. A line that cannot be the fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 11. Cannot be Messiah. Cannot be Moshiach. He's from the banished line of the kings of Judah. Not from the stump. That's the only ancestral tree we have. The only reason there'd be a stump in chapter 11. He had no form or beauty that we should look at him. Commentary. This could never describe Jesus. Jesus is thought of as perfect, a handsome and beautiful man. Everyone except for certain Jewish religious leaders found Jesus to be charming and someone to be listened to. That we should find him pleasing. Commentary. If the arid ground was a Christian country, and his form was a Gentile under the Jewish law, the halakha, in the beginning, would he be attractive and pleasing to the Jewish people? Not at all. And that kind of falls in with the verses of chapter 52, 13 through 15 that are in quotes, combined together, that his appearance was so awful that it appalled them. And yet he goes on to silence kings and make them gaze, right? But if he comes from a Christian country, a Gentile, with God, to Israel, and converts Orthodox to Judaism, and becomes an Israeli citizen, then the answer is yes. They'll find me pleasing if I do all that. Verse 3. He was despised, shunned by men, a man of suffering, familiar with disease. As one who hid his face from us, he was despised. We held him of no account. That's from the JPS also. Midrash. He was despised, shunned by men. Commentary. He will be despised and shunned and held of no account simply for declaring that he is the Lord's righteous servant, Moshiach, described in Isaiah 53. And that's already fulfilled. Christianity, with God's wrath passed to them, and the rabbis reckoned with and dismissed, shall see what has not been told to them, shall behold what they never have heard. That's just about every single thing that's in this book that I'm teaching on these videos. I am the only teacher God recognizes. He no longer recognizes your rabbis for false teachings primarily. Gentiles will despise and shun the man who startles nations and silences their leaders for announcing that he is the anointed one, Moshiach. The Jewish people have been waiting for, and that Jesus cannot be the man described in Isaiah 53. We're covering it right now. Nor 11. Chapter 11. For the reason they expect, the Jewish people will despise and shun him for the reason they expect and have been taught. Yes. It's okay if God interrupts you. I can hear him right now. He just messes with me a lot. It is the nature of people to reject, despise, and hold on no account a man who has no visible proof to substantiate his claim that God speaks to him as God spoke to Moses, that he is a man prophesied to come in the Hebrew Bible, that he is a messenger of covenants of God, that the Spirit of the Holy God has alighted upon him, and that he offers himself for guilt to God. I do have one thing that substantiates it. God gave Moses 3 proofs. He's given me 3 proofs. This is the main one. There's no rabbi today or that has ever lived or sage or theology in Hebrew, the Hebrew Bible, that knows any of the matters you're hearing on these videos. Man and divine beings, they don't have a clue that it is all over the Hebrew Bible. They don't know anything about a fire refiner. They don't believe the Holy Spirit of God is a person. And on and on and on. God's got a top 10 fallacies and false teachings of the rabbis of Judaism. It's in the book, I'm pretty sure. It's definitely been on video. So it must be in the book. All my videos come from this book. And the other book he dictated to me, The Life of God's Righteous Servant, which is primarily just to show how I fit these verses. Jesus was not despised and shunned by men. Multitudes followed him everywhere he went. 12 men left their way of life to follow and care for him. He was loved and highly esteemed. He did have religious enemies and infuriated religious leaders at synagogues and merchants at the temple. But they could not attack him because of his legion of followers. Midrash, a man of suffering, familiar with the disease. God's righteous servant will be a man who has a life full of injuries and wounds, accustomed to illness and disease. See, my book, it's God's book on me, the righteous servant Moshiach. That is a complete life full of suffering, not one day. Lots of people got crucified in the days of Jesus. But he only suffered for one day. 8 hours. And he gave up and released his spirit to God, his ghost. I got shot through the abdomen one day. And on a ranch, 8 hours away from Houston, of getting to Houston. We did have one small stop at a small hospital, and they said, there's nothing we can do to you. We're going to put you in an ambulance and get you to Houston. That's how severe it was. It went in the right side, right where my bladder is, and went straight across. The gun was just 2 feet away from me, and went towards the back into my left buttock. The bullet got lodged. And continuing, Jesus wept one time. It's the shortest verse in the New Testament. Jesus wept. And that was because he had just raised Lazarus from the dead. And it says that still, nobody believed he said he was who he said he was. He is never portrayed as a man of suffering, familiar with disease. There's not one account of him being sick. He is known as the unblemished Lamb of God who lived a perfect life, free of any sickness, disease, or wounds until his crucifixion. Who hid his face from us. He was despised. We held him of no account. Commentary. A man who is despised and held of no account is not going to go out among the people until the perception of him changes, and I am asked to. He is asked to. All I get after all of this time, and it's been a long time since we finished that book and started putting it on videos, all I get are critical comments. People just can't believe it, just like we just read. Why, despite held no account, why? Just for saying you're him. Brings the Christians down on you and the Jewish people. Especially all those followers of Tovia Singer and Jews for Judaism, who believe Isaiah 53 describes Israel. All the Jewish people gathered at one time. They ought to read, they ought to watch the videos on 23 and 24. Because I go through their commentary and I show how ridiculous it is. The witnesses are Jews that are made righteous. First 6 verses. They're all the same people. It's in quotes. Outside of certain religious leaders and some merchants at the temple, all the Jewish people loved Jesus. He never hid his face from them. He was never despised. And he was always held in high esteem. Verse 4. Jesus hadn't fit 1, 2, or 3. Yet, it was our sickness that he was bearing, our suffering that he endured. We accounted him plagued, smitten, and afflicted by God. You see the sickness that he was bearing? I bet you get to it. In the book of Ezekiel, he's pinned to the ground for 430 days. 430 days by God's power. And God's got him handcuffed with the cords of his power. And it's for the punishment of the sins. It doesn't say of the sins, but it says the punishment of the house of Israel and the house of Judah. And it would have been for sins. It's what the punishment was for. It's what the exile was for. It was comparable punishment. But he's a priestly man. He's spent his whole life trying to get people to stop sinning. And now God's telling him he's got to suffer the sins of Jewish people. And it's just to prepare him to be a prophet. There's no vicarious suffering by Ezekiel for the exiles. They were still in exile. I think he went into exile. He must have. Okay, Midrash. Yet it was our sickness that he was bearing. Our suffering that he endured. Commentary. The sickness is not being righteous. They suffer the sickness of not being righteous and not being in right standing with God. God's righteous servant suffers by the chastisement, punishment, bruising, crushing, and maltreatment. Those all 6 words are in Isaiah 53. Laid on him by the words and power of God, who afflicts him with birth defect, and and by crushing him with disease, to make him suitable for the purpose that might prosper. A purpose that includes making the many righteous by his knowledge with long life, and the building of the 3rd temple. The righteous servant Moshiach bearing up to this fire of refinement. That's what God calls it. It's just to make you into a prophet. It's to calm all your emotions. We have a lot more on this in other videos. To be recognized as a prophet of God, that in and itself will draw the Jewish people back to Judaism, recounsel the families one to the other, and make the many righteous. Jesus did not bear the sickness or endure the suffering of the Jewish people. They continued to have illnesses and continued and endured monumental suffering for years after his crucifixion. God afflicts the man 2 times in Isaiah 53. And affliction can be born disfigured, blind, lame, crippled, mute, deaf, and afflicted me with cancer to crush me so that I would make myself an offering for guilt. And I'm sure we'll get to that when we get to verse 10. This describes a man that God does not like, which couldn't be true of Jesus. A sinner whose life is full of bad events. Again, not Jesus. Sickness and suffering. No. I'll agree. He suffered for 8 hours of his life, 30 years. I've got over 20 surgical scars on me from accidents. And God claims to have had a part in every one of them. Nah, I believe him. It doesn't bother me. It's as though, they still happen as they happen. Jesus was never counted as plagued, smitten and afflicted by God. Doesn't fit the verse 4. Verse 5. But he was wounded because of our sins, crushed because of our iniquities. He bore the chastisement that made us whole, and by his bruises we were healed. There's a lot to this thing. You need to watch all the videos, particularly 21, 22, well, we're doing 22, 23, and 24. Because I'm really just focusing on how Jesus doesn't fit it without explaining everything about the fire of refinement, which is God's, I call it a boot camp for prophets. And you have to, it's brutal. And it's like a cadet going through a boot camp to become a Green Beret Marine or a Navy SEAL or breaking a wild horse so you can ride him. It's physical pain, emotional pain. The book of Ezekiel is the key to understanding Isaiah 53. The purpose of Ezekiel was to be a prophet to the exiles of Assyria, Babylon. And to prepare him, God said, I will make your face. This is the definition of the fire of refinement. Again, Ezekiel's the key. I will make your face as hard as theirs. Okay, before this verse, this quote begins, God told Ezekiel, the Jewish people are not going to listen to you, for they do not listen to me. And then God says this, I will make your face as hard as theirs, and your forehead as brazen as theirs. I will make your forehead like adamant, harder than flint. Do not fear them, and do not be dismayed by them. And then God maltreats, punishes, crushes, bruises, chastises Ezekiel for the punishment of the houses of Israel and Judah for their sins. But that's not what it's about. That's just the fire of refinement. I'm going through it so I can make the many righteous who are sinning. Get them to get back to synagogue, back into the Hebrew Bible. But all my suffering has not been a vicarious lifting of their suffering for them. Which doesn't even happen with the Christians. I mean, Gentiles still suffer, still get diseases, this and that. Jesus didn't stop any of that. People still die. He didn't kill the devil. Which Judaism doesn't even believe in. For 430 days he is pinned to the ground with his hands handcuffed behind him in God's power on one side. All of that except for 40 days when he gets to switch to the other side. Eating nothing but bread, chastised by the words of God. The Assyrian, Babylonian exiles were made whole and healed only if they listened to and heeded the teachings of Ezekiel of repentance, restitution. Same with me. I just explained it. God's righteous servant is wounded. Then, I'm not talking about being gut shot or almost losing my right leg on a broken glass Coke bottle in accidents like that. I'm talking about in his power, he has absolutely wounded me. Slammed me to the ground on cement 3 different times, busted my chin open. And cracked my skull. I got a nerve that still won't come around. My head feels numb up here. Wounded, punished. The whole thing's a punishment as far as I'm concerned. God's righteous servant is wounded, crushed, and chastised by the world throughout his life, with persistent hardships and troubles, grievously affected especially by disease, and severely injured at one time or another. Can't be Jesus. A man of many injuries and scars, broken bones. My scars are my stripes. These are the qualities that I